The first story is the most unsettling for me. On our days off right after high school, my cousin and I would routinely drive my parents' golf cart around the neighbourhood and into the back of the large neighbourhood because it was abandoned and completely overgrown. We knew all the abandoned construction trails through the forest and where they met back up to the roads that were completely unbothered by any suburban houses. It was broad daylight, probably around 2 or 3 p.m., and we had parked the golf cart coming off of a trail and toward the concrete roads into the back part of the neighbourhood. The grass on the unused lots was covered in weeds and grass that was probably 5 or 6 feet tall off the ground. We unleashed the pipe, take a few hits. All is peaceful. The birds are singing, the air is clear. He takes another hit and passes it to me. I start to light the bowl, and before I take a hit, I hear my cousin say my name twice, very seriously. I panic and think the cops have just pulled up or something. I look at him and he's staring straight ahead, shocked, and just says in a low voice, "What the fuck is that, cuz?" I look up and down the road and I see it. It's a little man peering out from the grass on the left side of the road, about 20 feet away. It looks like he's a naked humanoid completely covered in mud and crouched down as low as a person can go while still being mobile. It's not human, but it's human-shaped. With both of us staring at this creature, he backs up slightly and then, still disturbs me to remember this, Rhodey runs faster than humanly possible across the concrete road and into the grass on the other side. It was like a human moving as fast as an insect does when it panics. Imagine crouching down as far as you can go without falling over and then sprinting. This thing appeared to do just that. No words needed. I disengage the parking brake and gas it. We drive all the way to the front of the neighbourhood to the community centre area, probably a mile away, and decide we should just go home. Lots of frustrated, "What the fuck was that?" followed because there was no rational explanation at all. We still talk about that story all the time. Funnily enough, about a year ago, my parents moved to a bigger house about 100 feet from where this happened. Once the neighbourhood started building back there again. The second story must have been about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a year or two after the first one. Very general timeline, but you get the idea. I was hanging out with a friend and his girlfriend, as well as his weed dealer, which was a guy I'd known for a long time also. I'd stopped smoking weed by then, but everyone was good company, and I'd have a few beers while they did their thing. After a while, it became apparent that we would have to give the dealer a ride back, and we decided that we'd all go together and just take my car, so we did. It must have been 9 or 10 in the evening. The dealer's house is a straight shot down a main road for about 15 minutes. We get onto the main road through the city and everything's completely normal for a while. We're almost to the neighbourhood and suddenly, police lights. Oh fuck. We pull over into a well-lit gas station right in the middle and the whole routine unfolds. The officer accused me of pulling out in front of somebody trying to make a right turn, despite us having all green lights and riding in the middle of a 3-lane road. His reason for pulling us over was soon incomprehensible, but he ended up recognizing the guy in the front seat, the dealer, who fortunately didn't have anything on him. So cuts are waiting around and 3 more cop cars and the drug-sniffing dog. Of course, the dog hits off on nothing, and we get the whole kit and caboodle of stepping out while they search the car. Here's where the fun starts, because they begin pulling out a lot of my occult stuff, like an athame and wooden chest full of sigils and candles, and some other mobile all-purpose stuff. Haha, what are you guys, some kind of devil worshippers? I roll my eyes. I open the trunk for them. Nothing in there but a black robe and a Ouija board that I've used for years. Of course, they take both out and wave it around and make fun of it all some more. The encounter ends without any great dramatization because they expectedly found nothing. I loathed that they had tossed around all my tools, but I'm a pretty level-headed practitioner. We drive the dealer to his house and part ways, and head back to my friend's house to mess around and have a few beers. I head home at around 2 or 3 and go to bed. Let me forewarn you that I've never had sleep paralysis or apnea. I don't dream particularly all that often, or spectacularly, and I can't recall a single instance of experiencing a hallucination in my life. So when I see things, I know there's more to it. I don't wake up. I'm still asleep. I feel like my spirit is brought to the surface of a deep water. I open my eyes and sit up, but I can't see. There's a really weird noise, a rhythmic whooshing that's bringing me to full wakefulness. My vision slowly expands outward from the center with a blue tinge, very unusual. I immediately become aware of the fact that I'm not alone, and I look into the room that expands out from the foot of my bed. It glows blue because of the moonlight coming in from the windows at the opposite end. A few feet out from the foot of the bed is a high-top round table, with 2 high-top stools on either side. I can hardly see it though, because there's a perfectly silhouetted goat-man-looking being, perhaps 7 feet tall and very wide, sitting on the high-top stool closest to me and facing my direction. He has moose-like horns, and it's the source of the whooshing as he is breathing very heavily, just like a runner after a hard run. I can't see his features, but he's obviously looking right at me, and I'm looking at him. I blink. I'm experiencing sleep paralysis, I think. I blink more. I become very afraid, and there is really a 7-foot-tall goat man sitting in my bedroom. This is not a usual predicament that I have to face. I probably stare for about 10 seconds before I get hit with a sort of communicated feeling that the being had just come from doing something very awful to some people, one person in particular, and then rushed here to alert me of it. The breathing slows a little after another 10 seconds, and the being moves to get off the stool, the table behind him shifting and creaking as it does so. As soon as he hits the ground, he just fades out. I'm baffled, I'm afraid, but I'm relieved. I get up and turn the lights on, walk around the house, and everything is effectively normal. I sit and think about the whole thing, and the police incident didn't even connect in my head for probably 5 or 10 minutes. I go out for a smoke to observe the lake out back, and the sky because the moon is bright and beautiful. It might have been a full moon, but I can't really remember. I calm down and go back to bed, having been relieved by connection of events that I made. I don't remember what time this happened because I never looked, but it seemed like the middle of the night. I never had any further happenings in the vein of this experience, or seeing anything in the night. And I've never seen the being again. The last story wasn't super long after the guardian of the Ouija board, probably less than a year. I worked at a movie theatre during this whole period, and I had taken to jogging at like 2 or 3 a.m. after work. Perfectly serene, safe, and there was never anybody awake or driving around. The house was on a small triangle-shaped configuration of roads situated around a lake, with only one road going through the forest to get back to the main neighborhood. The road was out on the other side of the lake from where I was. Anyways, I come out from the garage and start walking down the road, and shortly come up to the first right turn. The orange of the street lamps keeps the roads pretty decently lit, but the orange lamps cast a spooky feeling. As I round the corner on the sidewalk, I see another jogger down the way on the other side of the road. I think about how odd it is to see another jogger at this time of night, so I slow down and kind of stare. It occurs very quickly that this is not another jogger, because most joggers are not 8-foot-tall ghostly shadow beings taking 6-foot steps. Due to the confusion, I don't even feel anything as I watch this tall, lanky shadow being run all the way down the road, right in front of me, and in between 2 houses and into the woods. He made absolutely no sound at all. As he passed right in front of me down the middle of the road, I saw that where his hands and feet should be, there was nothing but a fade to mist. Otherwise, he was just a 3-dimensional absence of light. After seeing that and taking a moment to process, I decided that if an interdimensional shadow being was running at full sprint away from something, I probably should too. So I turned around and noped out of there and back to my garage to sit in existential terror. After about 30 minutes, I decided that I was going to conquer my fear and run around the triangle like I intended to before having a paranormal incident. I succeeded, terrified, and luckily nothing happened on that attempt. This was like 12 years ago. I was in 8th grade, and for my biology class, our teacher told us that we were going to build an aquarium. So she assigned each student what we would bring to the next class. They told me to bring a turtle, and I did. One day before aquarium day, my mom, against her will, went to the pet store and brought me a cute little turtle and a fish tank for it. I didn't pay much attention to it at the moment. I only fed it at night, and that was it. So the next day, we were all at school with things from the aquarium and other animals, only for our teacher to tell us that the coordination didn't approve the aquarium project. That meant I had a new turtle friend. So I looked at it for a few seconds and said, "Hi, now I think I have to give you a name." I looked at it a little more and thought, "You look like a Patricia." I don't know, that was the first name that crossed my mind, and I didn't even know if the turtle was female. After that, I didn't think about it for the rest of the morning. At noon, I was sitting there with the turtle on the fish tank, both waiting for my dad to pick us up when these two girls passed in front of me, and one of them got really excited for the turtle. So she came up to me and the other girl just followed her. She asked me if she could touch it, and I said yes. And then she asked what name it was, and I thought of Patricia, but I still wasn't convinced. So I told her that I hadn't chosen any. She then looked at her friend, who was very quiet and expressionless, and asked her what name she'd put to the little turtle, and this serious girl looked at it for a few seconds and only said, "Patricia." I thought, what the fuck? And told her that was funny because I was also thinking of the same name. Then she looked at me, still expressionless, and said, "This turtle looks like a Patricia." And again I thought, what the fuck? And I said, "Well, it looks like Patricia will be." The other girls smiled at me, and then they left. I felt so weird for a few seconds. It was crazy that that girl had the same thought of me. I don't know. About 2 weeks ago, I was going to Hardee's with the hubbin when I abruptly interjected that the word Yggdrasil was being screamed into my ears repeatedly. Along with hearing that as if it were roared at me, I began to see this pitch black, gnarly tree in the middle of a large black field. It looked as if the tree was scorched, and it didn't have any branches. At the base of the tree was white ash in a neat circle. I then witnessed about 5 or 6 horses galloping around the tree, as if they were mad or crazed. They all had white eyes, and they were also pitch black. I looked up to see intense storm clouds, like those you'd see before a tornado, and vibrant lightning within them. I noticed that tendrils of lightning were raining down on specific parts of the field and destroying it. It didn't feel random. Throughout the whole thing, I felt this sense of dread approaching. And in the physical world, I felt the need to be on the lookout. I was anxious, and I felt like I was being watched. I've never encountered Odin. I believe that I've had some kind of seer or conduit ability since my first experience at the age of 6. I don't know a lot and have to reach out for sources or those who can interpret what I believe I witness. I'm still a bit freaked out by it. My little brother's best friend committed suicide almost exactly a year ago. I sat with his crying mother, feeling her pain like it were my own. But what was also so angry at him He abandoned my baby brother, his kids, a woman that was truly in love with him, but the sadness outweighed the anger. After the autopsy and his cremation, I suddenly awoke and sat straight up. I could feel someone. My dogs weren't freaking out, so I knew no one had entered the house from downstairs. I was looking around in the darkness, trying to get focus. My eyes made their way to the bedroom door, which I kept open for the cat. There was a spot that was darker than the rest of the darkness in the room. I was trying to figure out if my Jim Morrison poster was messing with me. Then it started to move closer to the bed. It was like if smoke could take the shape of a sphere. It slowly rolled toward me, with its smoke-like extensions rolling off of the air as it moved. It came to within inches of my face. I was terrified, but somehow knew it wouldn't hurt me. Then it retreated and went away. The next night, the same thing happened, except the room got cold, and I felt an overwhelming turmoil. I could see myself wanting to die. I reached up to touch it. The pain was so intense that I burst into tears. There were times in my life that I felt this low and I wanted to die. So to feel that again, after what happened, knowing that agony wasn't mine, made me physically ill. My cat fled the room. I knew it was him. It was my brother's best friend. I had seen that pain in his eyes many times. I had to run to the bathroom. I was very nauseous and crying so hard, I don't know how my significant other didn't wake up. Then it dawned on me. He just needed someone to understand. That person was me because I've been my entire life sensitive and I understand his pain. I've personally been there. Sometimes they come as lights, sometimes darkness, sometimes as what their physical being look like. Sometimes I can hear them, sometimes it's just a feeling. I was also always so scared when I was younger that I did my best to block it out. I looked at it like a curse, and because of this, over the years, I feel it less and less. Somehow, I miss it. It was so much a part of my being that I feel like I'm losing a piece of my identity, but have no idea how to get it back, or what I'd do with it if I did. I just feel like what I thought was a curse was actually a gift, and maybe I could have done something good with it. Coweta, Oklahoma. A small, quaint, and haunted town. Coweta was Indian territory. I lived in 3 different houses there, in different parts of town, as a little girl, and experienced hauntings or supernatural encounters everywhere I went. My very first memories are in that town. Some of them still scare me. There's a lot of history and a lot of old buildings and homes in the town. The first house I lived in was right across from some woods. My 3 siblings and I used to play there. One day, we decided to go in further than we ever had before. I was about 4 years old. We found an old, dilapidated shack. As we got closer to it, the leaves to my left flew up, and almost in a straight line, like they would for a sudden gust of wind, but there was no wind. It stopped right in front of me, and then there was a very loud and deep man's voice all around us that screamed, "Get out!" Needless to say, we ran like hell. I was the youngest, smallest, and the first one out of there. After this, I would always see an old man at the edge of the woods. He would stay there, like he was guarding them. My mother asked me one day why I was afraid of the woods. I told her because of the bad man. She inquired further. I told her that he was a bad man that didn't want us in the woods anymore. She brushed it off. Life went on. We moved away for a couple of years until my parents divorced. My mother moved us into a small 2-bedroom house that was close to our schools. She was sleeping on the fold-out couch and us kids had the 2 bedrooms. It was also right next to a cemetery. We'd play there, as curious children often do. There was always a man, probably early 30s, who would visit his mother's grave every single day. He was there every time we went, no matter what time it was. He'd pack food and camp out, talking away on this grave all day. We were intrigued. We'd hide behind the gravestones and try to hear what he was saying. I don't remember ever being able to make anything out, but his facial expressions and body movements were so casual, like there was someone sitting in front of him, keeping up the banter. One day, my oldest brother and I managed to get really close. We thought we were slick. All of a sudden, the man stood up, turned around, looked right at us and said, "What are you looking at, kid?" And then started speaking in a different voice, in a language we sure didn't understand. It sounded like well thought out gibberish, if that makes any sense. It's possible he was messing with us, but he was certainly creepy. I stopped going into that area. After a short time, we ended up moving into downtown Coeta. It was literally one street with small buildings neatly aligned on either side. We lived on a side street that was once a cemetery, back when the town was first settled in the 1840s. When they decided to build houses, they moved all of the graves. Well, I found out through my lack of supervision, it was 1990, and constant curiousness, that they built houses on top of graves. There were gravestones in the crawl spaces of at least 3 homes. There was a very old white 2-storied house that sat 1 block from ours. We saw multiple families move in and out only a few months later. The house was empty most of the time. My eldest brother, myself, and my cat climbed into the crawl space. My cat was awesome and lived the shit out of me. We attempted to turn a stone over so we could try to read it with our flashlight. As we did, something hissed. It was not a normal animal sound. It was like 100 voices all hissing at once in different frequencies. The hair all over my body stood up. We freaked out. My brother was out first, my cat second. As I got to the sidewalk, I saw my cat get picked up and thrown. Someone grabbed my hair and pulled me to the ground. I was so scared I started crying. My cat hid in my mom's closet and wouldn't come out until the next day. I ended up having a giant bruise on my right butt cheek. It was hard for me to even walk past that house after that. In this same house, with the graves and the crawl space, I would often see an old woman. I wasn't the only one that saw her, but I did more than the others. I mostly saw her at night, but sometimes in the day as well. At night, I would often wake up to her standing by my dresser, which was just in front of the door. She was illuminated by the hall lights my mom would leave on for us. She would just stare and move her mouth, but I couldn't hear her. On 3 or 4 occasions, she would put her hand on my crayons that were on the dresser. The next day, they would be moldy and dried up. I have no idea why she'd do that, but she did, and my mom just kept replacing them and still never believed me. Also would have stuff turn on by itself. Footsteps, whispers, doorknobs rattling, etc. I had a terrifying childhood in Coeta, Oklahoma. I had a haunting 9 years ago. I was a single mother with a 2-year-old boy and my 9-year-old niece. I'd gotten custody of my niece due to her mother being an addict. We just moved into a nice apartment and I was so excited to be able to give my kids a nice place. It was newly redone. New carpet, new walls, new trim, new everything. It was a weird setup though. When you walked in, my bedroom was on the right, living room on the left, and dining room straight ahead. To the left of the dining room was the smaller bedroom, which also had its own full bathroom. I think it was more for roommates than a family. I started having paranormal encounters the same day we moved in, so I always left both bedroom doors open at night, so I could see into the kids' room past the dining table. From the start, I would wake up at 3:12 a.m. every night. A lot of times my son would too, but would start crying. I would wake up to an old woman in my room. She would always stand in the hall that led to the master bath. She would always try to talk to me, but I could never hear her. Then my son would cry and I'd go comfort him and go back to bed. But sleep was hard to come by for me. As time went on, she would bang on the walls where the water heater was, jiggle door handles, knock photos off the wall, wake me up every single night at 3:12 a.m. She got more and more angry that I wasn't doing what she wanted, I guess. So eventually, she started appearing as a black, smoke-like mass. She'd get closer and closer, mumbling something I couldn't make out. My cat would always flee. I could feel her anger. I could feel the tension and frustration thick in the air. When she wasn't that black mass, she appeared more tattered and unkempt. Her hair would be a mess when it was once done up nicely. She would look so tired, sunken in eyes, became more and more frightening. Her behaviour was downright aggressive. The banging became so loud that neighbours could hear it. She'd rattle the doors violently. I thought someone was trying to break in, but no one was ever there. My dreams were cruel torments of me being raped, murdered, having my children kidnapped, every night. There weren't many nights that I didn't cry myself to sleep. I was doing my best to raise 2 kids, one of which wasn't mine, work a full-time job, and then come home to so much negative energy. I decided to ask my neighbours about previous tenants, as they'd lived there for years. Apparently, a woman took care of her elderly mother. Her mother died in my room. The apartment was totally redone because that woman literally had to wallow in her own feces. The daughter was very neglectful, and the pets were also never cleaned up after. I also found out the reason I was able to afford that apartment was because the rent was significantly lower than the other identical units. The manager of the apartments never told me any of this. Shortly after, I woke up again at 3:12 a.m. But instead of the old woman or blackness, I saw my son squatting on a dining room chair. I said, "Troy, why are you up?" He looked me straight in the eyes, smiled his sweet smile and whispered, "Mama." I got up to get him. As I reached for him, he just vanished. My heart sank. I couldn't breathe. I thought something had happened to him. I ran into the kids' room and they were both fine, sleeping away. I cried until I was totally exhausted and finally fell asleep. That's when I decided to break my lease and move. She'd unpack boxes, hide things, turn the bathroom light off when I was in the shower. She was trying desperately to talk to me, and I had no idea how to listen. I mourned for her. I could feel her pain, but I also had a family to take care of. I had my stuff packed and moved in under a week. If you have any idea what it's like to be a single parent with 2 kids and a full-time job, then you know that was an amazing feat. I had a dream after we moved that there was a diary hidden behind my water tank. Why I never thought to look in there when she kept banging? I just hope she found peace. I had a friend, Bailey, who was raped and murdered. At the time, I was a single parent with a 3-year-old boy. Every year, there's a balloon release at her grave. I had to take my son with me this year. He had never been to a cemetery and had never met Bailey or her family. He asked Bailey's mom if he could have one of Bailey's balloons. I never told him Bailey's name. She happily obliged. We all share good memories and laughs. We release the balloons. Tears are running down my cheeks as they silently drift away, further and further into the clear blue sky. After saying goodbyes, my son and I get into the car. I'm getting him strapped in and he says, "Thanks for taking me there, Mom." Odd, but I said you're welcome. Then he says, "We were here for the blonde girl, Bailey, right? There were no pictures. And she was here and is taking the balloons to heaven. And it doesn't hurt anymore, Mama, so thank you for taking me there." I wonder what she looked like to him. I wonder if she talked to him. The only person he was focused on the entire time was Bailey's mom, who needed the sweet innocent smile of that sweet blonde-haired boy more than any of us that day. He got to take one balloon home and had the best time of his life. We do not give our children enough credit. I'm a 35-year-old female. I've always been sensitive to the paranormal and have had some crazy stuff happen throughout my life, starting with my earliest childhood memories. The older I got, the less the experiences became. The last thing I experienced was last year, after my little brother's best friend hung himself in the woods, not far from my house. He came to me a couple of weeks later on two separate occasions as a black, smoke-like mass. I could feel it was him. I knew him very well. I could feel all the pain he was in, and I knew he just needed someone to understand. The last time he came, the pain was so intense I burst into tears. I know what it's like to want to die, to be in so much pain that anything had to be better than that life, and to be so completely hopeless. I felt like that again, only it was his pain I was feeling. I cried for what felt like hours, said I understood, and goodbye. He didn't come back after that. Nothing really happens in my current home, and I've lived here for years. There's been a couple other little things, but it was always just someone passing through. I live by a cemetery. I'm having extensive hip surgery next week again. Also, my older brother has been missing since Halloween. He's an addict and a violent schizophrenic. I'm not. Doctor keeps a close tabs on me, and I tell him everything. I suffer from CPTSD and recently had a major episode and have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I lost my job. Needless to say, I'm vulnerable, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. 5 days ago, I had my first encounter. I'm pretty much living in bed since I'm in so much pain. Both bedrooms are upstairs. It sounded like someone was in my boys' room, moving stuff around. I thought it must be my cat, but she was sitting on my dresser. I swear someone peeked around my door, but when I looked straight at it, they pulled their head back so I couldn't see it. I looked away and they peeked around again, just looking at me. So I got up and hobbled, on a cane, around, but no one was there. I thought maybe someone came through the attic, but the door was still closed and locked from my side. I just closed my door. Earlier that day, I had the feeling I wasn't alone as well. I never get that feeling in this house, so that was weird. I make dream catchers. I have like 10 or so hanging on my ceiling by my bed. I was laying in bed reading the night after the first incident. The dream catchers started moving and clanking together. There was no fan on and no heat blowing through the vents. It was like someone dragged their hands across them. My hubby was in the room, but of course, he was sleeping. My cat left the room before it happened. Not sure if she left because of the presence or not. 2 days ago, I was downstairs in the hall, giving the dogs food. The little dog was staring at the end of the hall where the stairs and front door are. She was barking hysterically. I didn't think anything of it. She's 15, half blind, and mostly deaf. But then, clear as day, a man said, "Knock, knock." The dog cried and growled louder and ran behind me. It scared the shit out of me. I never heard anyone go up the stairs and immediately checked to make sure there was no one there and the front door was locked. I made hubby check the whole house. Thankfully, he was on his way home for lunch when it happened. The dog reacted, so I'm not losing my mind, right? We do have carbon monoxide detectors, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid about my brother at first, but I'm not so sure that's all this is. Or maybe because of how vulnerable I am, the spirits thought it'd be fun to mess with me. I don't know. Just worried about my brother and worried about my surgery. I did talk to my doctor about it. He said it could be the PTSD somehow. If anything else happens, I'll make sure to update. Sorry for the long read. I hope it was worth it. Would also love to hear your thoughts or advice. Started calling morgues and hospitals again where my brother was last known to be. Lo and behold, he calls me later that day, strung out and asking for money. I declined and he hung up. Those dreams where he was in a snowy place he has lost, so I guess I wasn't too far off. He was 2 years sober and threw it away. As for the weird things around my house, nothing else has happened. I just sometimes feel alone and scared, but that could definitely be from the PTSD. Anyway, it was good to vent, and at least I know my brother isn't dead yet.